Here's my 2 cents worth. This country can't claim that it supports the military and the troops if it's going to continue to neglect millions of veterans who fought for it. Of the 18 million veterans, roughly 7% of the United States population, who have fought and served, there are nearly 40,000 veterans who are homeless. More than 1 in 10 have a substance use disorder, according to the National Institutes of Health, and there are many that lack mental health benefits or health benefits in general. Let's start with the homeless number. While that number is down nearly 40% since 2011, which is a good thing, we still have a lot of work to do, as the nearly 40,000 makes up about 11% of all homeless adults in the United States, and California is actually the state with the most veterans on the streets, 11,000, and a 17% increase since 2016. The average homeless veteran spends 6 years on the street, and 2/3 of them served our country for a minimum of 3 years. In fact, many veterans who are homeless also deal with substance use disorders or suffer from various mental illnesses such as PTSD. To tackle this issue, we first need to understand how veterans become homeless in the first place. Partly, it's because only half who need treatment actually seek help for things such as mental health or substance use, but even then, only slightly more than half who receive the treatment get minimally adequate care, according to the RAND Corporation. And the reason some don't seek help is because of the stigmas around seeking mental health care. More than 63% of returning veterans say they would not seek the help of mental health professionals, as they believe it may affect their military or civilian careers, according to the American Institutes of Research. Another issue tied to homelessness is poverty and the lack of funding to rural areas. 4.7 million veterans, 4.7 million, live in rural areas, and approximately 1.1 million live in poverty as of 2019, with the majority of them being over 55 years of age. That being said, the majority of homeless veterans in general are aged 31 to 50, which is over 40% of all homeless veterans. There's also a lack of affordable housing, and all of that paired with only 1 in 4 United States veterans having a job lined up after leaving the armed forces leads to them being on the street. A U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation study from 2016 found that 53% of veterans are unemployed for 4 months or longer after leaving the military. Only 1 in 4 vets have a job lined up after leaving the armed forces. Veterans have cited a lack of resources, underemployment, and not having a 4-year college degree as some of the obstacles that prevent them from getting a good paying job. To make matters worse, veterans' spouses have a 22% unemployment rate and a 26% wage gap compared to others, and these numbers were pre-COVID. There's also the issue of transferring professional licenses to other states. Credit to some Republicans on this issue, such as Doug Ducey of Arizona, who signed a bill to recognize out-of-state licenses in many areas to permit workers to become licensed in Arizona without additional training or education. Also under Trump, the veteran unemployment rate sat at only 3%, a historic low. But there's also the issue of underemployment, as I mentioned earlier, in finding well-paying jobs. It's clear we can at least do more in terms of setting up jobs programs for veterans, increase affordable housing, or make it easier to get veterans into their preferred occupations or line of work. In regards to the affordable housing part, Riverside in SoCal actually tried this with their Housing First policy initiative. Get vets off the street or out of shelters and into permanent housing before addressing substance abuse or mental health issues. By the end of 2016, Riverside had housed all 89 of its vets. The city's share of that feat was $348,000, according to Cal Matters. They have also been working to expand this to other homeless people, and for those out there who feel that this may devalue home prices, an argument that you may typically hear on this issue, the typical home value of homes currently in Riverside is over $637,000 according to Zillow. Now, on to mental health and healthcare services. Let's start with the mental health side of things. Anywhere between 11 to 20% of veterans who have served in either Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan have PTSD. 10% reported elevated levels of anxiety, and 11% reported elevated levels of depression. Regarding PTSD, this can come from varying factors such as the politics of the war, seeing dead bodies, the lack of support following the war, etc. But they can also include things such as sexual trauma or assault, especially for females in the military. According to the VA, 23 out of 100 women, or 23%, reported sexual assault when in the military. 55 out of 100 women, 55%, and 38% of men have experienced sexual harassment while in the military. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs reports that more than 45,000 adults died by suicide in 2019, with veterans accounting for just over 6,000 suicides, or nearly 14% of all adult suicides. That's an average of 17 veterans who died by suicide each day. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a stigma around veterans seeking help for mental illness. So other than don't send people to fight an unnecessary war in the first place, I don't know how much of a solution there necessarily is here. I'd still argue that we can at least do a better job at screening vets for suicide risk, increase highly trained mental health care providers, and also reduce barriers to care, and that's the one I wanted to focus on the most as we get into the healthcare issue in general. The VA provides healthcare for any illness or injury that they determine is related to military service. But their own website reports that 75% of all initial applications for VA benefits are denied, and the VA denies around 30% of disability claims each year. There's a number of reasons why claims are denied, such as dealing with the long application process and filling out wrong forms, conditions not being determined as service related, missing deadlines, not having enough evidence, and then of course various other reasons. This is a massive unnecessary headache, and there's surely a better system we can come up with to where veterans receive military retirement and better care. I'd start by saying a Medicare for All system would be a big help, as even TRICARE services vary depending on health plan. If the VA is to remain, there needs to be more workers to process claims, and the process to file a claim should be much easier than it currently is. Finally, I wanted to touch on the recent PACT Act that passed and was signed. The PACT Act, also known as the Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act, is supposed to expand benefits and services to veterans who were exposed to toxins, especially from burn pits, which are devoted to open air combustion of trash. They were used extensively in Afghanistan and Iraq, which emitted toxic smoke that later sickened troops. The Department of Defense estimates that 3.5 million service members were exposed to this. For more info on the PACT Act, according to the American Legion, while some ailments caused by toxic exposure can present quickly, other illnesses can take years to manifest, so they may not have those health conditions initially, they may come years later. This left many veterans outside their eligibility window to enroll in VA healthcare, and others struggling to prove a service connection because of the time that had lapsed. To address this, the PACT Act made significant changes to the timeline veterans have to enroll in VA healthcare. It increases the period of time that they have to enroll from 5 to 10 years following discharge for post 9/11 combat veterans, and establishes a 1-year open enrollment period. 11 Republican senators, such as Mitt Romney and Rand Paul, voted against it, with a Republican and 2 Democrats not voting. Oh, and how can I forget? The 88 Republicans in the House also voted against it, including our very own in this county here, Tom McClintock. Very pro-military of you, Tom. But this almost didn't pass in the Senate in general because it was stuck at 48-47 for the longest time, needed 60 votes because of the filibuster, and it took some massive backlash led by, of all people, Jon Stewart, who used to host The Daily Show, if you do not know of him. Stewart also fought for more funding for 9/11 first responders that eventually got passed as well a few years back. It's a pretty sad time in America when it takes a comedian to step up and actually get shit done. But thank you, John. Unfortunately, even with it being passed, there are still loopholes. On the same day President Biden signed the PACT Act, Army veteran Mark Jackson said he was notified by the Blue Cross Blue Shield that it was denying coverage for an osteoporosis medication that costs about $4,800 a month without insurance. His doctors believed his exposure was to blame for his thyroid disorder, anemia, rare infections, and brittle bones. And that's just shameful, and that is why we need to do more for our veterans. It's clear we need a massive overhaul of our healthcare system, as companies and the VA will find any way to deny claims. And look, I understand many who advocate for Medicare for All point to the VA, and they're wrong to. The VA runs much more like the crappy free market model where claims are denied and paperwork is complicated. If you're a veteran, you shouldn't have to jump through a ridiculous number of hoops to get care. It should be simple, as you show your status and you're quickly taken care of. It really should just be a human right for all healthcare in general, but especially veterans. I've got a rule that I'd like to see go into effect. Not one more boot on the ground and not one more penny spent on foreign aid until we take care of those who fought for our country and served for our country for the colors of the United States of America. It's BS to have people, especially leaders or people in the media, call others anti-America for being against a foreign intervention if they won't even talk about caring for those who fought overseas for us in the past. It's time we step up as a nation and do what's right for once. Protect and serve our veterans. And that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be right back here probably in a couple of weeks or so for another one. Until then, I hope you guys have a great week. Take care. Peace out.